Ryan Panish was the attorney asking the questions today of Karen Fay, who was the witness. Karen Fay is a hairstylist, makeup artist, worked with Michael Jackson for 27 years. They established her relationship with Michael Jackson. She first worked on Thriller in 1982-83, and for 27 years she traveled all over the world with him. She said that he was a magical person. She said a couple times during the day how much he loved his fans and how he interacted with them. We saw some great photos of Michael Jackson and some really nice photos of the two of them together. One of them was signed, "Your brother Michael." She talked about Michael Jackson using a glove and the white socks, later using finger tape and catcher's shin guards as part of the costume to direct the fans, to have the fans focus where he wanted them to look, which would be his moves. She also said that the tiger on the Thriller album and Bubbles, he used those as distractions. He was very shy, and these would pull attention away from him. We saw a video clip of Man in the Mirror in Bucharest, and mentioned that they also took a side trip to Dracula's castle. She mentioned that when they went on tour, what he looked forward to was going to orphanages and hospitals to see the children in other countries. And she talked about his injuries. We heard about the Pepsi commercial where he received second and third degree burns. The skin healed, but the hair wouldn't grow back, so he was using hair pieces, but that didn't work out for his performances. He had to have surgery to get the hair pulled over. The surgery caused migraines. Instead of suing Pepsi, he had a burn unit added to Brotman Medical Center named after him. Once in Munich, he was dancing on a bridge about 3 to 4 stories high, and that fell into the audience while he was dancing on it. She told how he would suffer from back pain from that point on, and stress would usually be a trigger. Karen Fay also talked about how he'd be so pumped up on adrenaline when he was touring that it was difficult for him to sleep. So in the beginning of her working with him, it was manageable because he was only doing 2 to 3 concerts a week, and that allowed for downtime. When the tours eventually increased the performances, it was less and less manageable. This is when the Dangerous tour became bad. Jim Wary asked her to carry pain patches that he was using on MJ for his migraines. Debbie Rowe asked her if she could learn how to give injections. Karen Fay did neither. Paul Gongaware called a friend, Dr. Finkelstein, and it was his job to take care of Michael Jackson and create a right balance of meds for him. There was also a Lloyd's of London insurance doctor, Dr. Forecast, that she mentioned. And then she mentioned the Singapore show. She said she went to the dressing room and Michael Jackson was stumbling, glazed over, and fell into a tree. She feared for his safety because in his condition he shouldn't be doing the toaster entrance or performing at all. She said that she told Dr. Forecast that he can't let him go on, and he got physically aggressive with her and said, "Yes, I can." The show was eventually canceled along with others. She said this was at the same time as the first child abuse allegation, and besides the physical pain, it was emotionally and mentally difficult for him to look out at the audience and think that all those people were looking at him wondering if he was a pedophile. The tour stopped in Mexico, and he went to this nice house in the countryside outside of London where there were rehab patients. She worked on the beginning of the history tour, and she saw Dr. Ratner near the end of her working on it. Paul Gongaware was on this tour with more responsibility than the previous tour. She talked about Michael Jackson collapsing on a special filmed in New York in the 90s, and that was attributed to exhaustion and dehydration. Earlier, she said that he would sweat so much on tours that he would lose 2 to 3 inches in his waist. She brought up the Madison Square Gardens performance where she showed up to get him ready, and a doctor told her he had just given him something and that he'd be knocked out for hours. She and Frank Cascio had to get him up, walking around, hydrated. They gave him bagels. Then came the 2005 trial, and she hated that he'd have to walk the red carpet through the front door, but the witnesses got to go in the back. His physical condition got worse. He couldn't eat because he was afraid that he'd throw up listening to these people that he loved lie about him, and he lost more weight. She was contacted by Michael Amir to see if she would talk to Michael Jackson about working on This Is It. It was clear that there was a lending agreement between her rep and AEG, and that AEG was her employer, and she answered in to Frank DeLeo. Paul Gongaware was at rehearsals often, Randy Phillips not so much. She said that MJ was upbeat and happy, great, although thin at the beginning, but as time went on, she saw a change in him. He was losing weight, his skin was really dry, his eyes were dry, he was repeating himself often. She said it was when Randy Phillips and Kenny Ortega would insist that he perform that seemed to be the turning point. She also mentioned that he wasn't the man she knew. She heard Paul Gongaware shout into the phone, tell him to get out of the bathroom, do whatever it takes to get him out. She went to Kenny Ortega and said that she felt they should bring in a psychologist. Kenny Ortega told her that Randy Phillips had hired one of the top 10 doctors to help. One time after this, she saw Randy Phillips and he said to her something like, "Yeah, I had to scrape Michael off the floor in London for the O2 announcement." She was instructed to listen to Randy Phillips, not Michael Jackson, and was told things like, get Michael Jackson on the stage and get his earpiece in his ear. We were shown emails written by fans to Karen Faye on how they were concerned about his health. They talked about him being a skeleton, and if nothing is done, he would die. She forwarded these to Frank DeLeo with the message that she feared they were right. On a side note, she saw Randy Phillips at Michael Jackson's funeral, and he told her that he read the emails and did everything he could. She also mentioned that Dr. Metzger was the only doctor she trusted. Brian Panzer said while asking a question at one point, "In the last 2 days of Michael's life, and that's what happened when I was there."